Hey, everybody. Welcome to another online panel. How are you all doing? My name is John. I'm the Senior Outreach Lead of Tabletop Games at Kickstarter. And joining me is
Hi,
Anya.
sorry. I thought we were doing, I didn't know what was going on. I blacked out. Hi, I'm Anya. I'm the director of games at Kickstarter. I am responsible for the category. They put it all in my hands. I don't know if that was a good idea, but here we are.
And we're going to be talking about making your Kickstarter weird. So let's transition over to the slides. This is an adorable little raccoon waving. But let me share my screen first in order so you can see that. Awesome. Awesome. So here's a little raccoon waving. So we're Anya and John. We're 2/3 of the game team. Michael, who is over in Europe, is on vacation right now, enjoying life. But we're here, enjoying life as well. Kickstarter's mission is to bring creative projects to life. And the ways that creators bring those projects to life themselves is one of the ways is by standing out on Kickstarter. So what do we mean by weird? I kind of used weird as like a fun term, but basically I meant ways people can stand out, look unique, and kind of make themselves set off from all the other games that are on Kickstarter. Because Anya, you told me a number the other day. How many games are live on Kickstarter at any given time?
Typically it's about 600, but given the current pandemic situation, it's a little bit closer to more like about 520 to about 570.
Yeah, so that's a wild amount of games. But uh, basically, we put together a list of some projects. Well, I put together a list on you seeing them, some of them for the first time, even though you probably know all of them already. We're just going to run through them and kind of speak to what made them stand out, what was unique about them, and this could possibly give you some ideas on what you could do for your games. I don't see, just as a preface, like none of the stuff these folks did was like gimmicky. It was all very genuine, very close to who they were as people, who the project was, or what the project was. So yeah, with that note, let's get started. So Shasan. Shasan is a game out of India by a brilliant person named Zain Memon. It is, here's some stats about it. It's in production right now. They raised just over $300,000, just over 4,000 backers. And the wild thing about Shazan was Zain, I talked to him probably about a year before he launched the campaign. He looked up what some of the most controversial things to put on Kickstarter were, and he found out that one of them was political games. So he decided on making a political game, which, and his next game is going to be a religious game. So he's very much trying to kind of push the envelope. And he actually did this during Kickstarter's Break 100 initiative, or not Break 100, Break Kickstarter initiative, which Anya, do you want to speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the Break Kickstarter initiative. So we do a couple of times a year, we do prompts on Kickstarter. Zine Quest for this community specifically is probably the most well known. But essentially, they are ways to come up with different ideas on how to run Kickstarter projects. So, for example, Zine Quest, also one called Make 100, which is just make 100 of a thing. I know John is doing that, or have you done it? Are you doing it? What's the status?
I am. It's in development. It's going to be getting manufactured soon. Yeah.
Okay, cool. We've also done a couple given the pandemic. So things called Lights On, which is making content in your room. We have a newer one, which John, you probably remember the name of it, but it's escaping my brain right now, which is basically making political posters. So we do a whole bunch of different prompts.
Signs
Break
of
Signs have changed. There we go. I was like, we do so many, I just forget. So Break Kickstarter was an initiative and a prompt to basically try to break Kickstarter. So take what our rules are and like play with them a little bit, make them a little bit different. I would say make them weird. So political games obviously are, they're challenging on Kickstarter for a lot of different reasons, right? I think as we are just every single day, things get more and more political. The current state of the world last year was already really political. This year, right now, on August 2nd, 2020, it's inherently political. The fact that my own political statements here, wearing a mask to save lives is a political statement now is ridiculous to me. So political games can be really difficult because you get either the right coming in and getting mad at the left, or the left coming in and getting mad at the right. So it's kind of a situation where like you're just not going to please everyone.
Yeah, it's tough. And especially he's doing a religious game next, which is going to be interesting. And one of the things that Zane did for Break Kickstarter was he had stretch goals lined up where everyone could vote. So it's a political game, you get to vote, and you would vote on what stretch goal you wanted next. And if you didn't vote for it, it just went away, which, bothered some people. Some people were super into it, but he wanted to kind of push the envelope a little bit. And I thought that was super interesting. And something I hadn't seen before. And there were basically 4 different options. Some got unlocked in the end because he's also a very nice person, but there were a lot of things that just like kind of said, nope, we're not doing that. Let's see. Oh, the other thing he did was he made this unbelievably cinematic trailer for the game because by trade, him and his team are a production company. So they made this like absolutely gorgeous 5-minute. They broke it down to like a minute or two for the Kickstarter video, but they made like this very long 5-minute involved trailer that you can see if you go Google Shazam trailer. It's unbelievable. So let's see what we have next. Trogdor. So Anya, do you want to give some background about Trogdor because you know it very well?
Yeah, I'm actually using the I'm using the box right now as a stand to elevate my computer. So it's perfect in all senses. Yeah, so Trogdor, so the Brothers Chaps came to us. So taking a little bit of a step back here, we get a lot of questions about what exactly it is that we do at Kickstarter, right? So like, what do John and I do? What is our job? What is our responsibilities? Like, how are we helping creators to kind of like make their projects the best that they possibly can? And a lot of that is a significant amount of communication with creators. And the way that Kickstarter is set up is we have 15 different categories, and we roughly have at least one person sort of like dedicated to each category, with the exception of a couple. The big joke at Kickstarter is no one and yet everyone sort of owns fashion, because we don't really have a fashion expert. So if you see a fashion project, you're welcome to kind of jump in and work with the project. This actually came in through the film team, because there was some discussion about potentially reviving Trogdor as a animation project. And there was a lot of back and forth. That conversation started, I think, the year I started at Kickstarter, which was 2016. And then roughly around 2018, the person who ran the film team had departed Kickstarter, and it was passed off to another person. That person then looped me into the conversation because they were like, well, we're thinking of not maybe doing the animation project, but we would like to do a Trogdor board game. And I was like, yeah, if you told little 18-year-old Anya that she would even be able to like get on a call with the Brothers Chats, she probably would have punched you in the face and ran away. So it was like sort of a perfect dream. So it was then sort of subsequently passed off to me to kind of manage that relationship and do a lot of back and forth, a lot of conversations, advocating for the creators at Kickstarter, which was one of the easiest things to do, since, we're all, at the end of the day, everybody at Kickstarter is just a bunch of weirdo nerds who like internet things. So we had a ton of back and forth. And John, did I introduce you to them?
Yeah, I definitely wanted to. Yeah, right. It was great. It was lovely.
Yeah. So I introduced them to John for a couple different things. One was fulfillment and also just a consulting perspective. And so it was an all hands on deck sort of situation. But they had sent us the prototype. We sent them a bunch of gameplay feedback, which typically we don't do. We aren't really in the business of doing gameplay feedback at Kickstarter. At the end of the day, like, it's your game. Your community needs to kind of respond to what the gameplay needs are. But if you ask us, John and I probably together have worked in games for about 15 years, maybe 20 years total. Of both of our years combined. So we have a lot of institutional knowledge, and we're happy to kind of like provide feedback in that sense. So this was definitely like an all hands on deck situation, more so than a lot of other projects. And obviously it was very successful.
Yeah. I mean, in my mind, this was weird because it was personally weird, because it was like childhood like idols making a game, and I was like, oh my god, this is unbelievable. But outside of that, they made this wooden version with wormwood of a $40 to $60 game, or a $40 to $50 game, and this tier cost $1,800, and it was unbelievably gorgeous. I did not expect this when they were working on it. I think they sold maybe 40 or 50 of these, but they went out on a limb and made something unbelievably wild, and I thought that was unbelievable.
Sorry, John.
Yeah.
No, just that bottom right hand corner too. What I don't think is very clear is that those board pieces actually flip. So the actual game, right? You have to physically pick up those pieces and flip those pieces. That's how the game is played. That wormwood board is special for a lot of different reasons. One, it's obviously like very bespoke, very hand curated, high quality wood and things like that. But those little pieces actually flip, versus you have to physically pick them up and flip them over. They thought they were only going to sell 10. That is what they budgeted for. And so when they got to about 40 or 50, they were like, oh no.
Yeah. The thing also rotates. It has a little carousel on the bottom, which is bananas. There's metal inlay. The silver that you see is just metal that's been inlaid into it. There's Wenge. There's, I think, the reddish one. I don't know what that is, but I don't know. Wormwood, they're scientists over there. It actually said right there. But
But also, like, I think it's important to, like, this is such a cool thing for us too, because Wormwood are also Kickstarter creators. And so it's so rewarding for us to watch our creative community talk to each other. And like, a huge shout out to Wormwood for seeing this and saying, yeah, we have a vision for what this can be. Let's work on this together. They are an incredible team. Obviously, they're not able to take on every single project, but if you are able to work with them to elevate your project to this level, it is completely worth the time, the money, and the energy.
Yeah, just collaboration in general. I mean, I think that's a really good point. Is that the Trogdor folks, Homestar Runner, Matt and Mike, they weren't from the game community. They reached out, they got in touch with someone from Wormwood. That kind of gives them a little bit more power behind the campaign. Like, oh, they're working with Wormwood. Like, I think collaborations can work out really well when you're, kind of hand in hand, and it makes sense overall. Like, I think that's a great idea. So collaborations can be awesome. Let's see what we have up next. Who's She? Do you remember this one, Anya?
Kind of, yeah.
So it's basically Guess Who with a full female cast, and the focus of it is around accomplishments, not appearance. And I thought that was unbelievable. The quality's wild. I remember seeing this launch, and I was like, this is gorgeous. How many are they making? 10 of these? Like, what's happening? They ended up selling over 6,000 of them, and they're making them in their workshop in Warsaw, Poland. So they're hand assembling them. They're not painting each one, but they're hand assembling them. They laser etch them out. It's astounding the amount of work that has gone into these. This is actually already fulfilled. And the fact that they ended up selling over 6,500 of them is unbelievable. But the just the attention to detail in this was
Mm-hmm.
really nice. You know, the little brass clasps. I mean, everyone kind of remembers Guess Who, and it's just, you know, plastic with some little cards, and this just took it to a wild level. And I thought the thematic focus was great. I thought the build quality was great, and the fact that they were doing them on their own in a workshop, and they made 6,500, like that just blows my mind. Like I've tried to. I remember I shipped 1,300 copies of a game with a team of 5 in a storage unit, and that was like overwhelming. So I can't even imagine doing 6,500 of these and hand assembling them. It's wild.
I'm wondering, like, I don't know if maybe it's a trend or maybe it's one of those things where it's like there's a term for it when you're like everybody's pregnant. It's not confirmation bias, but there's a term for
Yeah.
it. And I'm wondering if the wood, like, it seems like using sustainable materials is becoming much more popular.
Yeah.
And wood seems to be something that is being used more and more for projects. I'm very curious just to kind of see the future of that. Like less plastic, obviously, but wood being, is it cheaper? I suspect it's not.
No, but there's no molds. That's the great part about wood, is that if you're laser cutting stuff out, there's no molds of like, you know, we need to cast this piece or whatever it is.
Right.
So that's the benefit there. So on shorter runs, it's really nice because you can do, you know, 100, 200. That's what Broken Token, like they make inserts for games, and they can get away with that because they can do shorter runs. They do them in the US, whereas they don't need like big, huge, massive molds to make these inserts, like you know, whoever's manufacturing with a long packer pen or something like that.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. Something I've been thinking about too, just like sustainability and materials use. Like, I don't know if I would say that's weird necessarily. I think materials that are not traditionally used. But I am really curious to just kind of see, as like, you know, our sort of earth resources are constantly being used up, what the creativity for like what people are going to be using. Like, is bamboo something that's suddenly going to be used a little bit more? Is you know, is like some sort of very strong leaf going to be a new thing? Like, that stuff I think about a lot.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely pay attention to stuff more. Whether it's not on purpose. I'm naturally just drawn to it. Like if this was made out of plastic, I don't think I would have paid as much attention to it.
Yeah.
And the fact that, you know, it had, you know, burn marks around the edges is just, it looks really nice.
Yeah.
And just really stood out. So I think that not only sustainability, but it also just, it's one of those things where not everybody's doing it, and it makes you go, oh, interesting. What the hell is this?
Yeah. Cool.
Speaking about weird materials, we have the Fuzzies. So the Fuzzies is made by Alex Haig, who is one of the designers from Wavelength, Monikers, Pitch Deck, and this is just a very weird thing, and I love it so much. It's live now on Kickstarter, but basically, it's the easiest way to describe it is it's Jenga with little fluff balls. So you get this little tower of fluff balls, and you have to pull from the bottom, put them on top, and there's different cards that make you put your arms in different orientations when you do it. I'm not entirely sure of the rules, but it looks, and you get some tweezers, but I think you can use your fingers if you want. It's one of those things that they made it in such a way that it's relatable. So it's grounded in, like, everybody knows Jenga, right? Well, here's some fluff balls. And I think it helps connect folks on that level of a game they're familiar with, but puts like a really weird, interesting twist on it that completely changes the way the entire thing is played.
How are they sticking together?
I think it's just the material. Like, I think it's just naturally not sticky, but I think it's just it happens to, I don't know science, but it just kind of sticks a little bit. Like, there's enough tension there.
Like creative lint.
Yeah, exactly. This is a very high quality lint project. Yeah, I think Alex would like that description. The world's first lint game. So yeah, I just thought this was wild and very current. The Shivers. So Shivers, made by a first-time creator. The premise of the game is it's a storytelling RPG with pop-up rooms. So I've never seen anything like this. I know games like this have existed, but when I first saw this, I thought it was a completely unique idea. But still, the execution here is next level. I've seen some games with like a little bit of pop-ups, obviously pop-up books, pop-up greeting cards, but the execution here is amazing. It's really high quality materials. The rooms magnet together, and it even has, there's different sizes of rooms. The art is unbelievable. It's actually the artist from a game called Monkey Island, and it has a little story card that in the back you can rotate, and it completely changes what is seen from the front, from the player's perspective. But then there's a storyteller on the backside who's running the game, and it changes their notes, changes their tips and tricks for the game. And I thought that was super interesting. Again, first-time creator, and they kind of had a hook, but they've also developed a really nice game around it. So not just a weird, interesting thing of, hey, look at these pop-up rooms, but they hired a professional fiction writer, Darcy Coates, who's writing some of the stories, and they're going to be doing some development with established game designers after the game launches. And I thought this was great because they have this it's kind of like a gimmicky thing where it's a pop-up book in a game, but they're actually building a very nice, solid game around that. So they're not just trying to rest on that one thing. I thought that was super interesting.
Yeah, we had them we had Andy at PAX Unplugged last year in our little space, and people just loved it. It's just so creative and interesting.
Yeah, it gives you like a little magnifying glass, which is kind of like, you don't like 100% need it, but it also like nicely sets the mood of like people are opening, like that casket, I'm sure, opens, and like looking inside of it with a magnifying glass. It's great. It's great. Kingdom Death Monster. So a lot of folks have heard about this game. It's currently the second highest funded game on Kickstarter, just recently surpassed by Frosthaven. Beyond just being a massive success and having absolutely unbelievable minis inside of it, the thing that set this off for me for this talk was when they ran their campaign. I had to go back and look, but they launched this campaign. So Anya, do you want to talk about like when you think campaigns are like hot times and not hot times?
Well, it's interesting because there's caveats to everything that we say, right?
Yeah.
So the advice that we give out, just to be completely transparent, is pretty much for first-time creators. Once you've sort of gone through the Kickstarter ecosystem, you've launched your 4th, 5th, 6th project, right? Like the advice that we would give you is going to be a little bit different. But for the sort of general talks that we do, it's easier to just tailor them for first-time creator community. This team in particular, I believe, if I remember correctly, this was their 5th project, and it's actually only their 4th project that funded. They had a mobile app. They wanted to do like a Kingdom Rush app of some kind, and it didn't fund very early on in the days of Kickstarter. And they sort of broke every single rule that we tell creators not to do. They launched on Thanksgiving and they launched at midnight. Those are the 2 things we tell people not to do. And the only reason they were able to get away with this is one, look at this, right? Like this is so wild and so creative and so interesting, and like your eyes automatically going to gravitate towards it. But 2, they'd already built that community on Kickstarter. So it kind of didn't really matter when they launched because people were already sort of like hungry for this content. So letting their community know like, hey, we're going to be launching at this time. It was actually really, really smart, and it worked out for them. Now, I do want to say that doesn't necessarily mean that this is a very special situation of them launching on Thanksgiving and them launching around midnight, right? it is not a guarantee that even if you're like a 10th time creator that will work. It was sort of all the stars aligned to make this happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And they also ran it through the holidays and through New Year's.
Right.
Which I run projects. I have a publishing company called Late Waste Games, and it would keep me up at night, like going up to a campaign that was running through the holidays and through New Year's, just because so many people were home. Again, 2020, who the hell knows now?
Yeah, but the other side of that is just the like gross capitalistic society that we live in.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
So like
Yep.
people's focus around the holidays is like, I mean, I think travel is probably going to be obsolete for a while, so I don't think people are necessarily spending money on that. But given a non-COVID related situation, typically what people are doing is they are spending money on travel, and they are spending money on that sort of instant gratification. Like, I need this gift now for my kid. I need this gift now for my partner. I need this gift now for my family, like whatever it is, right? And so that sort of instantaneous buy, which is also sort of like replicated in the online purchases,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like that's where people are typically spending their money because they know something's going to be delivered at a specific date. I can track that package. Versus a Kickstarter project, which is the estimated date of delivery. Again, important to note that that date is an estimated date. It is not a confirmed date on Kickstarter. It means hopefully I can reach this. But also, that is not an instant purchase. So once people sort of realize that, I understand the perspective of a creator saying, but I want to capitalize on the holiday season, right? Like I want this thing to, I want to be a part of that. But the reality is you're not actually going to fulfill that project until a later date. So that's the other thing to keep in mind.
Yeah. Yep. Precisely. All right, let's see what we have next. Pax Pamir. So Pax Pamir is a game by Cole Whirl, and it's from a company called Whirligig with Cole and his brother Drew. They did a reprint of Pax Pamir. It's currently in production, and the wild thing about this was they're very in tune with their audience. They talked to them in various places, and they knew what they needed to do for this campaign. So they only ran a 17-day campaign. It was very precise. They knew when they wanted to launch, when they wanted it to end. And I remember talking to Drew about this, and he was like, everyone's telling me to run a 30-day campaign. I'm thinking about running a 17-day campaign. What do you think? I was like, you know your audience better than I do. So if that works, that works. I couldn't do it because I don't have the guts, but have at it. And he was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And I was like, all right, that sounds cool. So he gave it a shot, and they did really well. And it's currently in production right now. Anya, can you speak to campaigns running days that are either drastically less or drastically more than 30, and how you've seen it work out?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is from Cole is very well known in the tabletop space, and he has really built that trust within the community. Now, it probably would have made more money. They probably would have made $1 million campaign if they'd ran a 30-day campaign. But I don't know. I don't know. I get uncomfortable when I'm presented with the narrative of, I just want $1 million campaign on Kickstarter. Like, I don't know. That raises a lot of red flags to me versus I have a vision on what it is that I want to do. And I'm going to like, I just need X amount of money to finish the thing that I want to make. I think that's just a little bit better of a relationship between you and your backers as a creator. And I think it's a better relationship just as a backer, right? So typically we say 30 to 35 days. We've actually done a fair bit of amount of research on this, and we found that 30 to 35 days is sort of the sweet spot. So anything over 35 tends to be a little bit too much. People just kind of get tired by that point. And anything less than 30, unless there's a specific reason, and I'll get into what those two specific things would be. There's probably 3 or 4, but just for the purposes of this, 2 is important. It's a little bit too little bit of time. If you think about why 30 to 35 days is key, it's 2 pay cycles. So people have 2 pay cycles to basically like potentially fund the project, at least here in the States, right? So one reason you would not want to run a 30-day campaign is if you are part of a prompt that we're doing. So the things that we're talking about, like Break Kickstarter, Zine Quest, Make 100, Lights On, Signs of Change, things like that. Some of those are like 7-day campaigns specifically to be part of that prompt. So that's totally fine. Great. Don't run a 30-day campaign. Abide by the rules to be a part of the prompt, right? The second is communicating to your community, hey, we're only going to do a 17-day campaign. We're only going to do a 15-day campaign. We're only going to do a 20-day campaign, whatever it is. And letting them know ahead of time, like, this is going to be the duration of it. If we don't hit it by this day, this thing doesn't get made. So Cole and his brother being able to like have that community of people that are like, yes, we want this thing to be made. We were like so obsessed with Root and everything else that you've done. It bodes well for them. But again, stars aligned, perfect timing. You really have to make sure you kind of know what you're doing in that space.
Yeah, agreed. Someone just asked, have you seen projects incorporate like a choose your own adventure flowchart or anything similar on their page? I personally haven't. Have you, Anya?
I think I have. I can't think of anything. So it can get a little bit tricky there, right? Because a lot of it is about managing it. And I would also say the other thing to keep in mind that I don't think is necessarily super explicit, choose your own adventure is totally fine. If you want to get your backers a little bit more involved in sort of that process of like, and choose your own adventure can mean a couple different things. If you're talking about like choose your own adventure where your backers sort of pick different things to unlock in the game, right? That's fine. As long as it's not a voting system, just in terms of like a prize giveaway or like a contest or anything like that, that we just don't allow, unfortunately. And we've seen projects get shut down because of that. We ask you to take it out. If you don't take it out, then you're in danger of having your project shut down. But getting the community involved is great. Totally support that. I'll have to do a little bit of digging. John, you put our info at the end, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Cool. Yeah. So just email us. I can do a little bit of digging there.
Yeah. And we have one project coming up that kind of does that, but not really. Cool. We'll get there. So someone just asked, in each of the examples, you talk about campaigns that did things against your best practices and it worked well for them. Why would a new creator want to risk that? Why would we want to make our Kickstarters weird? So it's not that these campaigns are going against, I mean, some of them are going against best practices, but the reason, and Anya spoke to this, is because they're confident in their fan base. They're established, like Cole, he made Root. A lot of people know who Cole is. So doing something a little bit weird makes complete sense. It's a risk reward situation. So these folks have like carefully calculated that. Kingdom of Death Monster launching over the holidays, they clearly carefully calculated that. I think, I don't know, but
yeah, to be fair too, like we did not see that coming. Like I got back from the holiday break and people were like, oh my God, congratulations. And I was like, what's happening? What's going on?
Oh, you didn't even know. That's interesting.
Yeah, we just didn't even, I mean, like we'd been monitoring it, but like we literally, like I was on vacation, I got back and it was like, oh yeah, there's like a $10 million project. And I was like, what's going on? Like that was very much like an exception to the norm.
That's a good point that I think you just touched on, is we don't know every single project that's on Kickstarter at all times. Sometimes campaigns launch and we just don't see them because there's, like you said, like 500 to 600 of them.
And there's 3 of us.
Yeah, exactly. Like we do what we can, but we can't be aware of everything. So even with Kingdom of Death Monster, yeah, things happen. It gets, the whole process itself gets a little weird sometimes. And then one more question. No, never mind. Let's go to the next. I got some nice little product shots of Pax Pamir. We can show those. So this is the game I was thinking about that it was kind of choose your own choices, but not adventure. Like there was a story for sure. So this is Trial by Trolley, made in conjunction with Simon and Happiness and Skybound Games. Again, 2 companies that have a very large existing audience and one of which in Cyanide and Happiness that is I don't know what to call it, like wild geniuses when it comes to story and voice acting and jokes and everything. So they basically made a character called Trolley Tom, who was this lovely, adorable trolley operator. And the point of the game is that you're presented with questions of whether you go left on tracks or right on tracks to destroy whatever's on either side of the tracks. So they did this in videos. I think they did like 10 of them throughout the campaign, and they gave people choices, either just fictional characters, like do you want to kill all Kickstarter backers or the team of the Explosism team, and people chose to kill Kickstarter backers and not their team, which was interesting. But they also gave them realistic choices. So one of them they gave was either Trolley Tom's dad or Kickstarter exclusives. And they let everybody choose what they want to destroy. And during the campaign, people were destroying cards that they could get so fictional characters could survive. And that blew my mind. They had the engagement in the audience, but the idea of like giving people that type of choice and giving them the ability to invest in a fictional character, I thought was wildly interesting. I wasn't around when this was up. Do you remember when this was going on and what your thoughts were?
Yeah, I do remember, but this actually didn't come in through the games team. This came in through our podcast outreach person.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah. He also was our comedy person. So it was sort of like that perfect combination for him. So he did a great job though. And obviously, it raised over $3 million. It's also just like, their stuff is so wild. It's so wild. Everything they do is just, I'm like, what is happening? It's just chaos.
Yeah. It's nicely executed and organized seemingly. So I think it's great. Let's see what else. Okay, so Frosthaven.
I don't know it.
I don't know it either.
I heard of this game.
Found these box pictures on the internet. I don't know what they are. So Frosthaven.
Kidding, Isaac, if you're watching. Kidding.
Who, Isaac? Who? What? So Frosthaven recently launched and raised more than any game on Kickstarter ever. Surpassed Kingdom Death Monster, and there are a number of reasons why this game is very wild and weird. I mean, yet again, another example of a creator with an established audience, but still doing some wild things. So I think the first thing I wanted to point out is that at the core of this, I mean, Kickstarter is a place where you want to give backers something extra. You want to give them a view into the process. You want to give them some special items. Maybe you want to maybe give them a little bit of a discount or a price break on the game, and they get a little bit extra. They get something super special and unique. So you want people to be interested. The MSRP of Frosthaven is $160, and Isaac offered it to folks for $100. Like, that's wild. Like that to a lot of people, that just doesn't make sense. And he's able to do that, or was able to do that, because there were so many people buying the game. I in no way advise that folks go into Kickstarter and say 50% off all of our stuff. Like, don't do that unless you have something like this, which most people don't. But that in and of itself is just wild, and the amount of stuff that comes in. If you're familiar with Gloomhaven, Frosthaven is supposed to have about 20% more stuff than Gloomhaven. Gameplay, content, physical content, box size is going to be 20% bigger. So there's a lot of things going into this that are, when people looked at Gloomhaven, they were like, that's ridiculous. But this is 20% more ridiculous. But when this was launched, was right when the pandemic started. And there were questions all around of like, is this the right time to do this? But Isaac had been working on this for so long, and he wanted to press forward with it, and it worked out. And it was not a situation where he could have had a choice of known quantities. It was an unknown. So the fact that he went into this unknown with a game that was priced in such a way that is so massive in scope, I thought was what made it really stand out in the end and made it, weird, but and honestly just unique. So yeah, I don't know what your thoughts on this are, Anya.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things to kind of take away from this. I don't know. I go back and forth with how the pandemic sort of affected this project. I actually think I have no evidence to back this up. This is just my own brain, just anecdotally. I think there's a couple things to think about. One, I think that Isaac and his team had done such a good job of hyping this project up before it actually launched, right? And so that was through various PAXs, that was through just like community, like letting people know this was coming. And so the excitement that was around the project was so high. And the last show that it I believe showed at was at PAX East. We had them in the room and they also did outside demos. So the buzz was just getting more and more and more aggressive. And I also think, to be perfectly honest, that I think launching, nobody saw the pandemic happening, obviously, like totally unforeseeable circumstances. But I think also at that specific time, people still had their jobs, right? Like the unemployment was not what it is right now. And I think that people were just looking for something to use as a form of escapism. And I think that that actually helped benefit this project more than it potentially hurt it, right? Because we've had, we've heard like, oh, if the pandemic didn't, if the pandemic hadn't happened, it would have been even more. And I don't necessarily think that's true. I don't think it necessarily would have been less either. But I do think there's something to be said that sometimes people look for forms of escapism when there's uncertainty. And I think it was, again, stars aligned sort of situation. That doesn't take away from the project. That doesn't take away from the incredible amount of work that Isaac and his team did by any means. But I do think that there is a different perspective to kind of view it through.
Yeah. We may never know. it's impossible to know that, but that's a good perspective of like what would have happened. Like what would have happened if Kingdom Death Monster launched in, I don't know, like January 7th, that it ended on January 7th.
Yeah.
It might not have had like the same, I mean, to get this much backing, like 83,000 folks and almost $13 million, it's astronomical. But they did it. So, I mean, who knows? Let's see. So that's actually the last one we have, and we're a little bit ahead of time, but that's okay. So if anybody has questions about some weird ideas that they're thinking of, by all means, let us know. Please let us know. These are our emails. We're here to help. And if you have questions, concerns, anything like that, feel free to drop us a line. And we're down to chat.
I did think of a project. I thought of a project. I can't believe you didn't include it too, actually, two of them.
Hold on. I'll bring it up.
Okay. I think you know what I'm thinking about, but
I don't think I know, but hold on.
Okay.
Again, I just turned it off accidentally and I was supposed to say something. Sorry. Cool. So, this is just Frosthaven showing all this stuff. Okay, what's the project?
Beast of Balance.
Oh, yeah. So I was going to talk about Dark Tower, but yeah, Beast of Balance.
That was going to be the second one I was going to say, which like leads into Dark Tower. Just that whole story is so interesting.
Yeah, so let's talk about Beast of Balance. Go for it.
So this was one of the first projects that I was introduced to when I started at Kickstarter. And I had come from a space where I was working at Nickelodeon and we were actually looking at AR like pretty aggressively, and it was like nobody was getting it correct, right? Like AR is just, it's AR and VR for games is really, really, in my opinion, very difficult. And I know that's not a very popular opinion, but I do just think it's sort of a difficult thing. It's the same thing as the digital board games. Those are like that a lot of people are making. I think they're difficult. It's a hard selling point. But this game in particular was such a great version of putting an object, a toy, putting an RFID chip in it, and then creating an app that was also associated with it. It was fun. It was different. It was weird. It was exciting.
Keep talking. Let me get something. It's not the game. It's something else. But it's
okay, no worries. Is it a dog? Are you going to show us your dog? Because if it's not a dog, you're wrong. So I still had my like weird Nickelodeon brain on because I was so new at Kickstarter, and I was like, oh my God, there's so much here. Like, this is such a huge opportunity. And so having the cards that have the RFID chip, and so you scan the card in, and then you take your character, you scan the character in, right? Like, it's not a completely perfect system of how to play the game, but it's by far the best implementation that I've ever seen of using the RFID chips for an AR experience. And it funded, they did incredibly well. I am shocked at how well it did, considering I don't believe I think they were like a relatively newer company. But they did extremely well on Kickstarter. Anytime it was shown at a show, people just kind of lost their minds. They're so excited about it. Lost their minds is not the correct term to use. I need to stop saying that. They were very excited to see it. And it was really kind of cool. Just like, this was the first project that I really kind of saw from the tabletop space of that sort of like digital analog crossover. There we go.
Yeah. So let me go down a little bit because I'm going to show you what. So they made this awesome dragon, and it was a very large dragon. However, in one of their tiers, they offered a gold dragon, which I actually made for them. And it's this.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it's solid metal finished in gold, and it's very weird. Like this doesn't work in the game, but yeah, it was just a fun thing. They made a gold one, and they also made a silver one. So, and they're solid metal, and yeah, just doesn't work in the game, but it's just something they offered on the campaign. I thought that was fun. Yeah. Oh, and Tim did this. They made a handmade set, and I don't even know how many of them, 100 or something like that. 10. They only made 10, thank God. Hand sprayed like wood textures, like it was unbelievable and so time consuming. He made 10 of them, so I thought that was wild. So Dark Tower, we still have some time. Did you already mention? Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I haven't. No. I haven't mentioned this. I did not explain that relationship.
Yeah. So Tim Burrell Sayward, who's one of the owners of Sensible Object, who made Beasts of Balance, was consulted to make the Dark Tower. So the middle thing here, this ominous, wild thing that is currently being worked on, and it's. From the gameplay stuff that I've seen of Dark Tower, the integration here is spot on. It's not too much digital stuff. It's not only tabletop stuff. There's an integration here that feels very seamless, which is tough to do in games. I've seen a lot of campaigns with, apps or something along those lines that it just doesn't feel fluid. But the integration here, there's a lot of stuff that just happens on its own that has been programmed in, which is great. So there's not like fiddling around with the screen as much or anything like that. It's just a nice integration, and it's this is again Isaac and Rob Davey. It's Isaac, Rob, and Rob, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's some shots. Yeah, here's some more shots of the tower and like the inside of the tower, which is just weirdly ominous and beautiful.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
We had this in PAX Unplugged too last year, and people were like, "Oh my God, this is amazing!"
I think they actually have design diary that shows you like the internals of this tower, and like with just nothing on it and just working on it. It's great. And that board, I have no idea what that board does. See if there's anything else. Okay. Question. Yesterday, we spoke a little bit about stretch goals can be abused. I wanted to ask our opinion on stretch goals unlocking new free content versus stretch goals unlocking new free content that people have to pay additionally for. So I'm guessing they're talking about like unlocking add-ons. Do you see one being more beneficial for Kickstarter overall? Does the attraction of new free content accrue more than just charging more?
Wow.
It's a good question. It's loaded, but it's a good question.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to give this response, but the truth of the matter is it depends on the project.
Yeah.
I would say that, like, I would sort of ask what your intent is with that, right? So stretch goals are, if it's about enhancing the gameplay experience and making the game better, great, all for that. If it's for add-ons that you weren't planning on doing, I would not advise that. If it was for add-ons that you were planning on doing, but you're trying to gauge interest, right? So if you're like, well, if that stretch goal wasn't met for that add-on that you have to pay extra for, I don't have to worry about it. I'm also totally okay with that. I'm wary about using stretch goals to just get more money. That always just makes me really, really concerned. I would also say that we are working on an add-on option on Kickstarter. So that might help eliminate some of the headaches that people are currently experiencing. That's something that you can email games at about, and we can provide you with a little bit more information. But if you're creating a project, you'll see it's an option. It's not currently openly available, but it's something that we're happy to have that discussion about.
Yeah.
I hope that answers the question.
I think so. I think that I've about stretch goals unlocking new free content just in the game, and then unlocking content that people have to pay for. I think that's valid, just because I think you just have to explain it to folks. I think they might not realize that if you're unlocking something that people have to pay for, that unlock might be allowing you to pay a graphic designer, pay an artist, to pay a game designer to make that content, but it might not be covering the cost for you to manufacture it. So making that clear to folks of like, listen, this is going to unlock our ability to make this thing. And then if you want to get it, you can get it. I think that's totally reasonable, but you just need to make sure you're communicating, like with anything, just communicate it super clearly. And then if you are including it in your game, quote it out, but quote it out with the original game. So anything that you're doing that like, hey, I'm going to be weird and I'm going to do this wild thing, that's cool. Just quote it. Make sure you know the actual cost. Make sure you know all the potential pitfalls. Like, you can't know everything, but know as much as you can. So when that thing does come out, it can be weird. It just doesn't have to be reckless, I guess. Like, weird does not inherently mean that it's reckless and you're like, I'm going to give people another game for $5. Like, that's weird and reckless. Don't do that, please.
You should have organized chaos.
Yes, precisely. Kind of like conventions in general.
Yeah, you want to be like neutrally chaotic. You don't want to be chaotic evil.
Now you're speaking terms people understand.
Now I'm using the terms. There we go. And if you have no stretch goals, it means you're being lawfully good, and it's all fine.
Yeah, we should make a chart that just shows people where they. Like, what kind of campaign do you want to run? And we just put it. It's like a laminated sheet. We're like, circle the one you want to run. We can help you.
It's just John and I laughing at that. Everyone else is just throwing their computers out of their windows right now.
Yeah, they're like, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. Oh no. When we go back to the office, we can have a chart that we'll be like, hey, what about this campaign? We'll just circle it, and then no one else.
No, we are 100% not doing that.
Let's see. Okay. Some of the add-ons can't be added for. Someone said, don't forget that some of the add-ons can be added for free due to mass production, and some add-ons can't be added for free, as they'd add a ton of cost. So yeah, sometimes, I mean, so if you have for example, a deck of cards and there's 50 cards in it, you're going to have some manufacturing costs because that's not a full deck, but there will be costs to pay an artist or pay a graphic designer to do that little extra amount of work. There's always going to be, unless you already have the art ready and you have spare space on like chipboard, on a punch board, and you can just slip something on there real quick, that would ostensibly be free. But I challenge that question just to make sure that it's actually a free thing, because
Right.
there are a lot of things that people will assume are free, or very minimal cost, and then in the end, with the power of scaling, of if you have like X amount of backers, it's that minimal cost times the X amount of backers, and now all of a sudden you might be like $5 grand in the hole. So that's super important. Again, get used to spreadsheets to calculate your weirdness. Let's see. All right, so I think that's it. So I think we're good. We're gonna end a little bit early, and that's okay.
Cool. If people have questions that they didn't want to ask in a public forum, John, can you go back to our emails if possible? Cool. Feel free to email us. John and I both get the games at Kickstarter email. You can also email John or I or both of us. It's totally up to you. It's no worries. Like, if you like one of us more than the other, that's also fine.
Totally understandable. I'm not telling you which one, though.
John is the senior outreach tabletop person, just to keep in mind, and I am the director, so I handle also anything video game related, just to kind of help some of that delineation process. But yeah, we're here. If you, again, have any questions you don't want to ask, or you think of something after this, like, don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Awesome. Thank you all. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Farewell.